Hello, it's Brad Laurie or Blockchain Brad, and today I'm speaking with Sorovis. He is the CEO of Band Protocol. A lot of people don't know about this, but those in the know certainly do. Sorovis, thank you very much for your time today.
No, thank you for having me.
Now, mate, you're and you're very welcome. You're in transit right now, busy leading the way literally for Band Protocol. For those who are also wondering, this is entirely free, so thank you very much for your time today. Do you want to give us an update a little bit on yourself though, mate? Your background, your credentials, your skills to be the CEO of Band Protocol.
Sure. So it's funny. We sort of started way back in 2015 when my co-founders and me sort of got our first Bitcoin from MIT airdrop. I did a study in computer science from Stanford. My CTO was from MIT. We both Thai students in the college back then. Not a lot of people are interested in cryptocurrencies. So we sort of got together, got the first Bitcoin. That's when we first, got into down these rabbit holes, right? And we sort of first started with, building a mobile games that reward people in cryptocurrencies. That did really well. So we grew that to about 500,000 users. Before we sort of say, hey, in 2017, we say, hey, we should really quit our full-time job and start doing something more fundamental and contribute more to the industry, right? And that's when the three of us sort of quit our full-time job, started Band Protocol. Well, initially it wasn't really Band Protocol because initially we were sort of tingling with all this smart contract, trying to do all these different things, right? They said finance, betting apps, lottery apps, right? And we started to realize there's a really big common problems where when we build all these apps, it's really difficult to build a reliable app because it's just really difficult to get access to real world data, right?
Right. And I'm just going to jump in. We're going to talk about the actual problem, but I wanted to really talk about your credentials for a moment. Now, you have a master's degree, as I understand. You are a Stanford boy. So can you give us a bit of a rundown on the kind of background you come from an engineering standpoint or from a science standpoint, or even from just an academic standpoint?
Sure. So like I said, I did my bachelor in computer science. So I do have quite a bit of technical background. Used to be software engineer actually. Before I did my master in management. Management science is a mix of both management and engineering skill. Also did that at Stanford. So did both of my bachelor and master at Stanford. That's when I sort of I think I have a really good mixed background of understanding technical structure. So that's why I'm still pretty much involved in the technical discussion,
right?
As well as the management.
Sure, and that's the reason why I asked as well, Sorovis, because later on as we explore the team's credentials, it's great to know that you have that engineering understanding, because it's one thing to engage in cryptocurrency, but it's another to really understand the blockchain, the dynamic beneath, and you clearly do with your background. Now, with regard to Band, let's really explore the why. What were the problems that really prompted, you were alluding to them before, that really prompted the existence or the development of Band?
Right. Yeah, so like I said before, right, when we started building a lot of this decentralized applications or just smart contract in general, it is really difficult to interface the smart contract logic with the real world data. And that makes the use case fairly limited, right? Take, for example, if you want to build decentralized lending, you need price of Ethereum, right? And that sounds really easy to do, but it's actually very difficult to do that in the most decentralized way, right? And if you do that in the centralized providers, then that defeats the whole purpose of using smart contract in the beginning, right? Or, like, for example, you want to build a betting app or lottery app. Sounds really cool, right? Anyone can participate in this in the most decentralized way. It is actually pretty difficult. Augur predicate on that, in just one project, right? It's basically the whole difficult part is about how to resolve the market, how to make sure that the market is accurate, right? In the most centralized way possible. So that's a big problem that we see. Hey, if smart contract or blockchain application to get real world adoption to really gain traction, and for the apps developers to build this easily, we need this data layer on top of all layer one. And we see all the people working on layer one, scalabilities, all the speed, transaction costs, right? But nobody really tried to crack this data apart from, I guess, Chainlink is working on it and a few other projects.
And we're going to talk about that later for sure.
So it is a big problem, and we do see that, if nobody cracked this, there will be no traction for the apps, and it's really difficult to build all this,
I see. So essentially you're trying to tap in and crack that data solution, the data governance, as you call it, in a decentralized way. There's obviously other centralized entities also trying to do that, and we'll explore those. But let's bring it down a bit more into the statements that you're making to really explicate what you stand for. Things like you want to be the protocol essentially for decentralized management of data in the Web3 stack. So let's explore those terms. What does it mean to do it in the context of Web3? And why data management? Why is that such an integral thing for the future of the entire industry?
Sure. So again, in the context of Web3, right, what does that really mean is, as we try to solve this problem and transition from Web2, where a lot of them are basically centralized companies, right, owning the internet right now, when we transition to Web3, where, a lot of this technology stack are basically decentralized, right? And if you look at the technology stack, I think you can look at it simplifying all these things. We can look at this really simple in 3 layers, right? The bottom layer is the state transition machine, obviously the computation part, right? Before we have AWS, we have Google Cloud, right? And now we are moving on to EVM, Ethereum's EOS, and all this layer 1 blockchain solution, right? On top layer, basically those are application. Before, those are centralized application like Facebook, Google, right? These people, well, these companies basically have their own data, right? They have their own data and they commercialize it, just like our users. And you see all this problem with privacy. You have all this problem with data being siloed, right? And the data is basically on the second layer, on the middle layer, right? Now, if you talk about that, when we move and transition to Web3, the top part is the decentralized application, like Steemit, IDEX, MakerDAO, right? And if you want to be decentralized, these companies or these projects will not have any data when it comes to users, when it comes to real world data or anything at all, right? So how do you solve that? Basically, because you still need that data layer in the middle. You still need that query data, right? Think of it as before. If you need location, you need to query to Google API. If you want some identities, you do Facebook login, right? You query to traditional centralized API. Now, in Web3, what does that look like, right? How does that work? That is the thing that we try to crack, because if you don't have that, again, the Web3 stack will not be completed, and it will be really difficult for the apps to sort of bootstrap their own data. Think of it as, if all the centralized companies need to build their own, location API to make it work, or to build their own identity to make it work, none of them will be scalable, right?
Right, and also you'd have that issue of silos. You wouldn't have a decentralized, robust, open system. Now, the big question is, given that it is an essential data layer, it's essentially what you're building, the conduit between layer 1 and beyond in the applications. Why is it that so few have already unfurled in this ecosystem? Why are so few decentralized entities doing this, like, for example, Chainlink, Oracleize, and the like? Clearly, it's essential.
Sure. I think a couple of things, right? One is to be fair, Chainlink has been pioneering this for almost 2-3 years, right? It is a really difficult problem. Chainlink has been doing well. I think the market has shown that there are now certain interests in the space for sure, and that is good in the way that it prompts a lot of competitors. It prompts a lot of projects to start working on it as well, which is what we see in the recent months, where a lot of projects start to focus on, in this decentralized Oracle, right? And I think before, the reason why people are not so focused on it, because they really focus more on the, scalabilities. They really focus on this layer 1 blockchain solution, because they think it would be able to capture a lot of value, right? Or because obviously nobody has really cracked that part of the layer yet as well. So I think, we start to see that trend, that shifting, where people start to see, hey, maybe layer 2 protocol, or what we call middleware protocol, actually has a lot of value. They might be able to capture more value than layer 1. As I don't know, you heard of Chris Berniske from Placeholder really put a lot of emphasis on this. He wrote an article where he does believe that sometimes middleware protocol may be able to capture even more value than layer 1, where as only just a gas payment, right?
Exactly, and a lot of people would agree with you, I think, on that with regard to acronyms like SaaS, BPaaS, BaaS, middleware itself. A lot of discussions right now on how applications can facilitate the full stack in that sort of interim position. That's exactly what an oracle also does. So let's talk about the magnitude or the size of the data problem right now. One of the things I have read in literature that you put out is that 1.2 million terabytes of data are stored on the web currently, but a lot of it's unstructured and not reliable. You're trying to be a solution to that. So talk to us about how you're going to do that with the key approach you're taking.
Sure. So again, I think when you say that, right, that the keyword there is reliable, right? For us, and unstructured, I guess, right? The way we try to work is, with band protocol, we deal a lot with more structured data, because as we see, with the current limited use cases of smart contract, right? Decentralized finance, for example, is probably the only one that has traction at the moment. These projects or this application consume really similar type of data. So you don't need to be that flexible. You think about it, right? If you are able to reliably supply data such as price oracle, that is almost hit 99% of the use cases at the moment for decentralized finance, right? Obviously you want to expand to other use cases, but I'm just saying that with the current smart contract, you just need to deal with really limited structured data and make sure that it's reliable, meaning it's really secure, and it's being supplied in the most decentralized way possible, right? And it's funny because a lot of this decentralized finance are turning into an oracle companies because they realize that it's a big problem to crack. And that's why it's funny, because all these companies are spending significant resources trying to crack this problem, same problems, right? Where actually you can just have one company or two companies trying to crack that.
Right, and that's the big question is, can we have a few more than just one? And we can discuss that. But clearly, in the context of availability and reliability, two buzzwords for you, you talk about curation as part of that reliability and even the high quality data. So let's keep going with that. Why is it that those 2 points are so imperative to the process you built in to make sure that we can trust that there is a true use case, there is true need, and there's true quality behind it?
Sure. So again, if you think about data, it is even more important in the context of Web3, because in the trustless world, in smart contract, data basically dictate the logic of smart contract, right? Think of it this way: if the data is wrong, the whole smart contract is wrong, right? Then you can't even if you can't trust the data, you can't trust the whole smart contract, right? If you build a betting app where we can bet create a prediction market, I guess, let's put it that way instead of betting, creating a prediction market where if Chelsea win the match last night or not, for example, right? Everything in the smart contract is super trustless, right? But if the data is wrong, then basically you got cheated, right? So the data basically drive the logic of smart contracts. So it's actually one of the most critical part of this whole smart contract and blockchain, right? And so that is precisely the reason why we need to make it as decentralized and reliable as possible. And the way we talk about the way we approach it is that we look at it almost like a delegated proof of stake, where we have a set of data providers, right, who need to stake two things. One is obviously money, so they need to stake tokens as a collateral to work, right, in order to provide the data. Think of it as a work token, similar to Filecoin. Right. You stake tokens, you perform the work, meaning you provide the data, and then in exchange for that, you basically receive a fee from the query fee, right? Or an API fee, right? So you stake tokens for one. Two, you also need to stake your reputation, right? So again, similar to delegated proof of stake, where all these nodes or data providers need to identify themselves and say, hey, for example, I am Binance. I'm going to provide data from ETH per dollars every 30 minutes, right? I stake my tokens. So I have both my reputation is, usually even bigger than the money at stake. Right? If you're Binance, obviously you're not going to cheat over here, because the cost of cheating is way overweight the benefit that we'll get, right?
Hence the term reputation. So, they're putting out their own brand, their own position.
That's right. And think of it as, if you have a set of data providers such as Binance, CoinMarketCap, Bloomberg, Thomson Reuters, a mix of both traditional companies and crypto companies, right, who have skin in the game, then that make it almost as secure and decentralized as possible. Because again, you can't avoid the problem of having someone supplying the data off chain to on chain, right? That's a given. That's not going to happen by itself. Somebody have to supply the data. Now, how do you make that decentralized? Basically, you need to have a different identities and different entities, with different background, right? With different interests who stake tokens, money, and reputation at stake in order to become a data providers or a node, right? So that's the way we think about it.
Right. Okay. So how do we ensure, though, that there's a high quality of data in this system? Once again, because obviously decentralized is a mechanism that flips things on its head, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the quality would change. How do you change that game?
Sure. So again, when we talk about quality of the data, right, the original, I guess, focus would be on the more objective data. So this data are basically publicly verifiable, easily verifiable by public, right? So for example, you and me, you're in Australia, I'm in Thailand, we can certainly agree what is the price of ETH right now, right? Maybe 300, 301, whatever, right? But we can sort of agree what is the actual answer, right? Or even better, if Chelsea win the match last night, I think everyone in the world can sort of agree on what happened, right? In that sense, right? So we deal with those more objective data. So it's actually really easy to verify if the answer is right or wrong, right? In that sense. So with that, right, we have a set of data providers who provide the data. If somebody provide the wrong data, obviously it's really easily verifiable. So anyone can detect that and sort of penalize that data providers, right? Again, they have money at stake, and two, they have reputation at stake, right? And the way we approach the actual answers, so for example, if you have 5 or 10 data providers provide the same data, we only take the majority or the medians of the data itself.
Okay.
So if it's a number, we take the medians. If it's a string or answers, then that would be a majority, right? So with that, it actually tolerates up to 50% of the malicious actors, right? So again, if you want to attack and change the actual on-chain answers or data to make it basically inaccurate, you need more than 51% of the token powers, right? So that's basically 51% attack, which is the same as almost any single blockchain in the world.
It makes a lot of sense. And if you increase the number of data sources, surely that increases the democracy of this system. And once again, moving into that decentralized. So how many of those sources have you built in now? And how many are you planning on building in the future?
Right. So this again depends on the context of data, right? If you talk about price oracle, we have over 10 data sources, right, that we source the data from. We expect this number to also increase. We also expect the minimum amount of staked tokens or the money at collateral will also increase as there are more usages, right? Because if you think about it, the way we just have to engineer this in the most simplest term is that the cost to attack, this 51% attack, has to be more than the benefit that the attacker gets, right? So if there are more money at stake, meaning if the data is wrong, then the money is gone or whatever, right? The money at stake here, then the number of data providers need to increase. The number of stake has to increase to make it more expensive, basically, to attack, right? Similar to Bitcoin and other blockchain protocol. Right? That's the way we think about it, and because of that, that's why we call ourselves data governance and not data management or data solution. Because if you think about this, it's more about governance, meaning all these people who have stake in this, who for example, all the DeFi project who consume Price Oracle should have a stake and be able to govern how these data are being used and how these data are being curated. So all these parameters can be changed, just like stability fee for MakerDAO, right? It can be changed, it can be voted, on chain, and that's gonna evolve over time as we see more usage.
Right, and clearly Chainlink's already proving that narrative as well, that in terms of governance, and arguably without it, things simply wouldn't function on any of the stack of the designs that we're seeing. Now, with regard to your process, let's talk a little bit more about applications, or DApps as they're known. In the context of Band, obviously alluding to Chainlink as well, what's your vision with regard to DApps and the way in which they can engage with something like Band as an imperative service?
Right. So when we think of the apps, there are two things that we think of them. Number one is, our solution need to be easily integratable for the apps, right? Meaning all this smart contracts are already complicated by itself. So the way we approach this is how can we make sure that the apps developers can easily integrate Band into their smart contract without complicating any of the logic, right? That's actually the most important thing, because if you complicate the logic, then it make it really difficult for them to use it, number one. And two, it also introduce critical flaw in the smart contract, because if they do it wrong, as you see in parity, as you see in many hacks, right? In Ethereum, that's a big problem. So that's the way we approach it, make it super easy for developers, as easy as copy and paste the lookup code, just like a key value lookup pair, to make it super easy for any developers to integrate any part of the band protocol into their
Got it. So you're making it easy. How is the interface? How is the access for the developer if it is
Sure.
so easy right now?
Right. So the way we think about this is, our model is, we call it a push model, where a bunch of this data provider broadcasts the data, right? And then eventually these data are aggregated, as I mentioned, as median or majorities, and then one single data are being pushed on chain, meaning the data is actually written on the blockchain itself, right? So again, blockchain is a database, right? So when smart contracts that live in the same blockchain want to access this data, it's a really easy table lookup, right? It's like a key value lookup, just like any data that live inside a blockchain, right? You can query to find that variable really easily. Just copy, like it's as simple as 2 lines of code actually, right? Just copy our interface and just say, hey, I want a price of ETH. And that's it. You receive a price of ETH that is being written inside the blockchain already, right? And that's really instant, meaning, the data is in there. So the lookup is like, it doesn't take any seconds, right? To look up the data, there's no delay, everything is instant. The smart contract can process in a linear way, so that makes it really easy to use, right?
And it's all transparent as well, Sorvis, which is an important thing for auditing for assessments. But what about the nature of your protocol in terms of being agnostic as well?
Right.
Because clearly that's going to be a boon for you as these layer 1 solutions continue to build. If we talk about Ethereum for one example, that's not the last entry point for you or relationship you possibly could work with. Chainlink has shown that their relationship is strong with Ethereum initially. What's your plan being agnostic?
So actually, that was the second point I was going to touch on, because because all this layer 1 solution need data, right? If they don't have data, all the DApps that want to be built on them are really difficult to be built, no matter how fast you are, no matter how cheap you are, right? It's going to be really difficult. So what we do when we try to take this approach is that, again, we want to be this layer 2. So that means we are blockchain agnostic. We want to build on top of all major layer 1. And that's how we think about our go-to-market, meaning we partner with all this layer 1 solution in order to build the data solution for them. And once we have that in place, it is really easy for us to go with layer 1 and say, hey, any DApp that want to be built, let's say decentralized finance, you want to build stablecoin, you want to build betting app, you want to build games, you want to build social network for identities. Hey, now it's really easy to do, and now we go with them, right? So that's really easy for us, because now all layer 1 need traction. If you look at layer 1, they are also struggling to get traction, right? And we are helping them with that. And they're helping us with that. So it's sort of a win-win situation, right?
Yes, and that's really exciting, considering we are seeing, some of those barriers and hindrances to the development with regard to scaling of these layer 1s. Now, there's some very prominent ones at the moment. You, with your background at Stanford, and certainly some of the investors have really been paying attention to you, and we'll talk about them. But who are you likely to partner with, or who are you now discussing with regard to prominent blockchains, such as Cosmos, for example, even Ethereum, as a starting point? Let's really go there. Let's look at the quality of the layer 1s that you are considering.
Sure. Again, we probably cannot disclose all the partnership or formal partnership, right? But I guess we can talk in general in terms of what layer 1 we're looking at, right?
Okay.
Clearly, we sort of segment them into almost 3 parts. One is the traditional, or I would say the generation 1 of blockchain layer 1, right? Generation 1, meaning Ethereum's, EOS, right? Tron, even maybe.
The first wave projects, the ones that were
those are the first waves, right? That are already existed, already have working solution. Those are the ones that we are targeting first, obviously, because they already have working solution, they have working development in terms of the apps and who it really consumes, right? That's why we're on Ethereum right now. Right?
And they have developers.
That's right, and they have developers. So those are the communities, right? So those are wave 1, right?
Okay.
Then you also have this wave 2, obviously the next generation blockchain that have a lot of, really different, in terms of when it comes to technology, scalabilities, right? So
they seem to have tech tweaks where they've improved some of the things on wave 1, but perhaps don't have the developer communities. But it's great you're paying attention both ways.
But they do actually have a big community. So for example, was in China, where they are actually one of the biggest layer 1 project right now that's coming out of China. They have probably one of the biggest developer communities in China.
And what was that one called?
Sorry, Nervos.
Okay.
Nervos. Yeah.
Right.
So it's actually a really, really promising project. One of the founders actually he's Chinese, but he's one of the first Chinese, I guess, in the Ethereum Foundation to actually build out that EVM and all this. So
Right.
really,
Well, that's good to know.
it's really technical. So we are working with them in order to sort of build this layer one and try to go to market with them in the Chinese communities, right?
Got it.
So and then obviously you have all these other projects like Algorand, Telematics, and all these companies that are building the next gen, right? So we are working with them on a case by case basis, meaning hey, if there are use cases, we work with them. Right.
I really like that you're looking at the quality of these layer 1 and 2s as well, because obviously there's a plethora that came out in both contexts, but partnering with high quality for your own project will matter, I'd imagine, for the long term. Now, with regard to some of the other aspects of your design, for example, having reliable data sets, how important is it with regard to the token itself as well, in the context of having integrated data with your DApps? There's a lot of discussion through your white paper, through your literature about data sets itself. So what exactly are you referring to there?
You mean the dataset tokens?
Right.
Right. So this is the tricky part where a lot of people sort of misunderstand or don't really understand about our technical aspect, right? If you think about this data, again, there are many types of data. There are event data, like sport event. There are data like price event or price data. Sorry, right? These are really distinct data, meaning it has really different use cases. It has really different data provider. It has really different economics, right? Now, if you use one tokens, let's say band tokens, as a collateral in order to provide all this data, then that become a problem because why? For incentive to work, right? Let's agree on principle first. For incentive to work, if the data providers act in a good way and there are more usages for that data, meaning there are more query fee that accrue to that particular data set, then the value of the tokens should increase in order to reward the data providers, as well as the data provider should receive more fee, right? When it comes to doing that, right? Now, conversely, if the data providers act maliciously and they game the system 51% attack, then the value of the tokens should go down to 0, right? In order to penalize that, right? Yes. Penalize the whole data. Right. Now, that's the whole premise. That's the whole principle, right? So if we can agree on that principle that hey, that it should be that way, then it's really important. It is impossible to use band token as a token for every single data set. Why? Because the band token value are tied up to almost every data set, right? So let's say there's hundreds of data sets. Then if I 51% attack data set price oracle, then that doesn't matter because price of band will not tank to 0. It's still tied up to almost any other.
Right. This is also a way to protect the band token as well. So let's explore that in what I think you're alluding to, and that is this multi-token approach. Where you've really broken it down into making sure that each token structure has a key focus.
Right. So that's the thing. So in order for this to work, each of the data set have to have its own economics, right? If I do a good job in my data set and there are more users, I should earn from it. And if somebody game the system from other data set, then that's fine. It doesn't, doesn't attack. It doesn't hurt me, right? So that's the reason why all this data set need to have its own tokens in order to capture its own economics, right? And make sure that those incentives that I described earlier work. Right. Now, the problem is if you do that, you have hundreds of data set, you have hundreds of tokens. That's a big problem, right? As you see. It's a big problem with liquidities. It's a big problem with UX UI. If anyone had to come and buy all these different data set, right, tokens, then it become a huge, huge problem. How do we solve that? So we use a concept called bonding curve. This is quite similar to Band Core and Uniswap, meaning this bonding curve is basically just a smart contract that mint and burn this dataset token, right? Think of it as an automated market maker, right? It's automated market maker, meaning if I want to buy, let's say, a price tokens, right? Price Oracle tokens, in order to use it or in order to become a data provider, I send band tokens to the contract, right? To this bonding curve. The bonding curve take in band token and say, hey, okay, what's the exchange rate right now between band and the dataset token, that particular one? Send it back, send me back the price tokens. Then it mint the new token and send it back to me, right? Now, if I want to sell, I do the same thing, meaning I send the dataset token, the price token back to the contract. It burns the tokens and send me back the band tokens, right? So it acts almost like a market maker. I buy and sell with the smart contract.
That's
right?
really interesting also because it solves the problem of the question of the value of band in what it stands for. So it can be an isolated utility in its own context.
Sure. I mean, we can talk about the valuation after, but if you think about this, right? The benefit is that it does give 100% liquidities, meaning you can only buy and sell. You don't need to fight buyer and seller because you only buy and sell against a contract, right?
Right.
And two, it really simplifies the user experience because behind the scene, as a user, as a DApps or even like data providers, they don't even have to understand that because all of this can be abstract away from smart contract. If I want to buy into this, behind the scene band can be converted into this dataset tokens or vice versa in the seamless way because it's always interact with smart contract itself, right? So it really simplifies the user experience, make it much easier to deal with all these hundreds of tokens, to solve liquidity's problem, and most importantly, it also have a really clear price transparencies because this bonding curve is basically just a mathematical equation.
Right, and it's finite, it's set, literally algorithmically it's designed. So what about with regard to access to the public? And we'll talk about this later, but I just want to allude back to the fundamentals of band. Now that's a utility token. It's designed for the fuel of the whole ecosystem, incentivization, staking, all things are built into that. Now, will people be accessing this other token in any way in the future, or will that be more an internal mechanism that's designed as part of your multi-token approach?
Right. So I think most use cases of obviously absent of speculation, we don't expect more users to interact directly with the dataset tokens itself, but yeah, they do interact with the bank tokens, right?
That's good to know because I think it would get too conflated, too confusing.
Of course. Like I said, that's why we use bonding curve. That's why we make it, more geared toward the actual, I guess, data providers or the app themselves, right? Not regular users. Now, if you're a regular user, if you want to participate, you can because again, it's like a delegated proof of stake where you can stake on behalf of other data providers, right? If I think that hey, Price Oracle has a lot of use cases, and I think it's going to grow so much in the future, I would buy into the Price Oracle tokens, stake it on behalf of, let's say, Binance, because I trust Binance so much. Obviously, I want to stake for them, and then I earn a portion of their revenue as well, or earn a portion of that kiwi fee, right? That can also happen. And if you think about band, as you see, you can think of it as it's a work token, meaning, this work token is you stake. Let's say if you stake 10% and you do the work, again, you need to do the work. It's not like, you can stake 10% and earn a fee. That becomes a securities, right? What we do is you stake 10% in order to perform work, in order to become a data provider. And if you do a good job, you earn 10% of the whole revenue that flow through the system, right? In the most decentralized way, again, not through us, but it's actually enforced at a protocol level, meaning if there are more usages who consume the data, there's a query fee, as I mentioned. This fee got accrued and distributed back to all the stakers, right? So you stake 10% and the revenue or this usages grow, then there will be more cash that flow through the system and flow to you, right? So you can actually value this token almost like a dividend, right? You can value it as a...
You really could almost, in a more contemporary and progressive sense, you could. Now with that query fee, obviously that's attracting the attention of many interested parties at the top elite levels of crypto and even in traditional sectors, I'd imagine. So have you got many stakers now on the books, or are they all filled, those primary staker positions?
Again, it is really dynamic, meaning, in the once we sort of launch, right now we're still in testnet. So once we launch on the mainnet, obviously we have a couple of partners lined up in terms of becoming a node to our data providers, right? For each data set. Now it's really dynamic, meaning obviously anyone can join, right? Anyone can just buy the dataset token and become data providers. Initially, again, it's a degree of decentralization, right? Obviously, when we bootstrap the network, we have to be a bit more centralized, meaning we sort of surely pick who are these data providers, who we work with in terms of our partners.
You got to start somewhere. That's the reality.
You got to start somewhere, because otherwise it's a chicken and egg. Who's going to become data provider when there are little usages, right? And once we sort of grow that usages, then we decentralize this, meaning anyone can actually buy into this dataset tokens and stake and become data providers to earn fee. Right? Anyone can buy it and then stake on their behalf as well. So we see that spectrum, and then we're going to start here.
And will that be limited by number at all, or will you allow that to just progress over time to become open with potential?
I think I definitely think it will progress over time as we see more uses, more use cases, as I say.
Right.
If there are more money at stake, we need to grow this pool of data providers. We need to grow the pool of stakers.
Got it. I wanted to talk to you also about your team. Now, we talked about your credentials. There's no question there. But with regard to, for example, the CTO or CPO and other really standout members of your team,
Right.
I wanted to just give you a chance to let people know some of the skill sets, some of the credentials, because I have had a look and there's a few things that really do stand out, even though you have a young team, and that's the reality you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are certainly some, the knowledge, the proof of knowledge, the proof of experience is definitely there for some of them.
Yeah. So it's funny when people say, hey, we are young, right? I mean, I always say, hey, we are older than Vitalik. You guys are trusting Vitalik so much, right?
That's a good point.
So, just saying that. But anyways, besides the age, right? As you mentioned, I think we do have a big qualification. So when it comes to technical abilities, for example, right, my CTO, funny thing, my CTO is also named Sarawit. So we have the same first name.
Okay.
For some reason, we should name an SNS company or whatever.
You should.
Basically, his name is also Sarawit. He has a bachelor degree and master degree in computer science, both from MIT. 5.0 GPA, so like top. He got basically 5.0 in every single subject. Really smart guy, really sharp guy.
So big brain.
Big brain. What we like to say is, again, in alluding to a comparison to Vitalik, there's a Olympian competition for computer science. So in high school, people actually come and compete for computer science, like actually coding, right? He received a gold medal in that international Olympians. So around the world, I think that's roughly, 10, 20 people that got it, the gold medal.
Wow.
Whereas Vitalik got a bronze. So that's how
wow, it's really interesting because I've also been talking to another protocol or a project or startup named Nia, and they also compete at that level. So it's really good to know that I sincerely mean this, because that's one of the things that attracted me to the boys at Nia, Ilya and Alex, is that they did have those credentials, and I think they even knew of Vitalik in that context. So for you to have someone in your team, that means a lot, that they have that technical ability when it comes to building something like this.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, not just raw technical abilities, right? When we talk about how do we apply that to cryptos or cryptos world in general, we also have quite a long history. So, for example, my CTO used to be at Hassan River Trading. It's almost, I guess, it's number one high frequency trading firm in the world. So they do trade a lot of the asset in the world, right? And he basically built or led that effort to build a crypto trading solution for them way back. So it's almost 3 years ago, I think.
Right. So there's evidence that of development, and also the fact that they can build middleware or they can build content.
That's right. That's right. So we do have a long history when it comes to more technical skill as well as the experience in the blockchain space.
Right. I did want to ask you, though, in that context about the Thai connection, because obviously you come from that region of the world, and very few projects have been successful from that region when we talk about crypto startups. So what was the reason why so much of your team come from that region? Was it because of your own connections, or simply because you knew of people who had similar skills to your CTO?
Right. So again, when we say we're being in Thailand, right? I think yes, as you say, most of our team are actually in Thailand when it comes to engineering, and I think that partly due to, like you said, connection as well, because our CTO used to be, again, number one in Thailand, so he sort of knew all the people who are really skilled in terms of computer engineering. Somebody who actually been coding with him since middle school. So he and my other co-founder CPO has been coding together since middle school. So they have a long history. They have a long, I guess they do understand each other when they come to coding skill, right? Also, he did a lot of competitive programming. So he know all these friends who also participate in this competitive programming, which is basically algorithmic, like sort of coding style. Right. So that's how we sort of collect our talent when it comes to engineering. Now, when it comes to BD or business development, we do have people around the world. So we are looking to hire also in China, in Korea. We do have some people in the US, in Australia as well. So that's how we think about it. We have a concentrated engineering skill in Thailand, which nobody really have, because again, it's really difficult to find these talents, right?
Yes, well, clearly you had the connections, because we just haven't seen that kind of depth of skill set from that region. But I did want to ask you, why wasn't there more evidence of more collaborations at the team level with, say, for example, Stanford sources, or even anyone in the US? Because clearly you all have friends there as well, because you all studied there.
Right. Well, I mean, if you talk about collaboration, we don't have official collaboration or advisors, as you people may call it, right? In back in the 2017 days,
Right.
we don't really do that because, again, partly because we think, if we wanna succeed, again, we do engage help from other individuals, including my Stanford peers. So, for example, Tera in Korea.
Yes, I know them
Um,
well.
they are quite famous. I'm a classmate with Do, who's the CTO there. So we were dorm-mate, classmate back then in 2010. So I know him way back. So we do talk a lot. We do engage each other. I also ask for his advice and all that. So we do engage a lot of our peers at Stanford and MIT, actually, including professors as well. We just don't do that at a more official level because we don't think that's needed. We just do whatever it takes to make this project a success. Not necessarily need to announce all this,
I really appreciate that because there was just so much blockchain bullshit back in 2017 with superficial advisors, superficial partnerships, just to get the narrative going. So thank you for really making sure that, or letting us know that you're really focused on quality of the content, quality of the code, quality of the product. Now, with regard to the company itself, I wanted to ask you, is there a foundation built into this, or are you a for-profit structure? And if you are, have you planned for revenue?
Sure. So we are actually a foundation. So we actually built a nonprofit foundation to basically govern this in the long term. Again, I'm a decentralization maximalist, meaning I do believe in in the decentralized world. That's why we have tokens. Again, I think there are really limited uses for tokens, but they do exist, right? In the most decentralized way possible. If you want to be a decentralized project, you do need token to build all this economic incentive, because otherwise, how would you incentivize them, right? In a decentralized manner, you can't issue USD, right? So in that sense, right, we do believe that long-term wise, we do need foundation, non-profit foundation to govern this. We do believe that in the next couple of years, once this technology matures, once we have more tractions, then all of this can actually be run by itself or by the foundation, or being governed actually in the most decentralized way possible. That is our goal and objective. Obviously not going to happen in the next couple of years.
And it's a really benevolent one, because essentially you're giving up this code to the world so that it can be...
Our code has been open source since day one. So our code is always open source on GitHub. Anyone can check it since day one, actually, not just now. But
okay. So there's no aspects of this that are proprietary. There's no aspects that are closed, that you're trying to use for profit.
No. Again, we do believe in the decentralized world. We do believe that when it comes to competitive advantage, it comes down to BD, it comes down to network, it comes down to trust, right? Just like Bitcoin, right? Anyone can fork Bitcoin, right? But eventually, it comes down to trust. It comes down to communities, and that's what we are putting more emphasis on right now.
Sure, and you've also built in mechanisms so that it's not forkable, as you've mentioned with BTC. But the thing to mention here is building upon a protocol. Many teams are doing that. And I imagine you're thinking about how you can also optimize your own position to make sure you and your team can continue to do this kind of work for the future. So how are you going to engage yourselves with applications, for example, products?
Meaning, how do we engage with DApps, or?
Well, for yourselves in terms of construction, building, because it's one thing to build out the ecosystem, enable more developers to utilize your protocol. But what about yourselves as a team? You have the skill sets to create your own applications.
Got it. I don't think it's a priority now, at least in year one. I think in the first year, we are about optimizing our protocol to make sure, again, it's the most decentralized. It actually serves reliable data, and there are more usages from other DApps, right? Those are our first priorities. And again, expanding to other blockchain layer one is actually not an easy task. So that's what we're doing as our first priorities. As you mentioned, I think over time, when we crystallize that, once those are more settled, I think obviously we also look for application itself, meaning, hey, what type of application we can build ourselves on top of Band Protocol, right? Not just a proof of concept this time, but actually to commercialize or to actually build traction.
Great word.
Contract itself. And I think decentralized finance is a great example. I think we are still barely touching the potential of it. Like with all this over collateralized loan, I think it's really a fraction of what we will see in the next couple of years. So I think we are still barely scratching the surface. So that's why so we sort of it's funny. So we sort of take that approach where, hey, let's build our protocol. Let's see all this traction. Let's see all this DApp being built. And then we can crystallize that, and then let's see, where it takes us, right? Maybe it's really big that we just still focus on data and try to expand use
It's
cases.
very possible, because the market itself of data is just going to keep you very busy, I suspect, for a long time. But I do also want to make sure that you do have funds, and we'll talk about your runway, your trajectory,
We do have
and your
fun.
raise.
We do have fun, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Engineers live it. Yeah.
Right. Now, with regard to your token economics, I wanted to talk to you about scarcity as well, because when we see projects emerge, often they spend a lot of time now, especially 2019, on making sure they get the token modeling right, because in the past, it just hasn't been. Have you spent a lot of time in architecting this to make sure that there's a correlation between your token and your ecosystem?
Yep, for sure. So again, token economics or the token engineering is a big thing for us. Again, if we do believe in decentralized manner, right? Then these tokens need to be able to capture the network value or derive the value from the network itself, from the usage of the band protocol, right? And as you mentioned, in 2017, I think we see a lot of trend where a lot of the protocol project just say, hey, our token is a perpetual mode of payment. It's just a payment token, right?
Exactly.
And that is basically worthless, right? When it comes to velocity, when it comes to those problems, right? So that's why you see in 2018 and 19, a lot of projects start to pivot to see how can we provide a supply sink? How can we reduce the velocities, right? Now, again, I'm quite big in terms of economic research and try to research.
And I'm so glad you mentioned token velocity, because there's very few people that discuss this, but it's probably the most important part, is that connection, that inherent correlation.
Right. So again, if we come back to band token, right? What is it used for? Obviously there's many use cases like governance and all that. We're not going to touch on that because it's more intangible. But the more tangible part is where, hey, we stake band tokens, right? You stake band token, that means you take it out of circulation, right? So you sort of that already reduce the velocity. And
so scarcity is addressed there as well.
That's right. So when you stake it, you basically take it out of circulation. People can stake on your behalf and all that as well, right? But two, not just staking, right? Not just putting it there, but when you stake the tokens, you actually receive a portion of the cash flow from the carry fee, right? So again, when you do that, when you engineer such in that way, then you can almost value the band token proportionate to the cash flow or the revenue that flow through the system, right? All this query fee that come through, all this API query fee basically got distributed back to all the token holders to stake the tokens, right? You need to stake the token and perform the work. Again, the keyword is stake token, perform the work.
Right.
And from the
very
network.
important from an SEC standpoint, that last part as well. Yes, I too understand that.
That's why I try to stress that as well, because again, in the most decentralized way, right? It's not like the money come from us and then basically we distribute it back as a dividend. Right? We deploy this as an open protocol, and all of this is enforced at the protocol level, right? So that means, again, we're not touching the money. All the money flow through the system. You need to perform work. You need to be a good actor, just like you're a miner, right? You verify transaction. You're a good actor. You receive Bitcoin as a compensation. Same thing here, right? You stake band token, take it out of circulation. You perform work. You provide the data. Then you earn fee from the network itself. So now, when it comes to value band, then it's really easy to do that, because then you can think of it as almost proportionate to the number of data usages, right? If there are more DApps consuming the data or the query fee grow, right? Then basically the the actual amount of money that people receive, you can value this discounted cash flow model.
Got it. And that could be a game changer, quite sincerely, just having that way in which you designed this. Now, from an SEC standpoint, from a regulatory standpoint, from compliance, clearly there's a lot going on. You would have seen the Congress hearings recently with Libra. A lot of them are concerned about payment coins and currency coins, but you're not those two. You're clearly utility bound and literally bonded with the curving structure. So are you currently talking with any of those parties to make sure that you're compliant and that you're following all of the guidelines?
Of course. Well, I mean, we are in Thailand. Our main company is in Singapore, so we are in compliant with the Singapore local law and authorities, right? We are always on air on the more compliant side. And as you know, we are working closely with the right authorities and to make sure that we are in compliance. That's for sure.
Right. Well, you're lucky you're in that region, because Singapore is one of the most progressive regions in the world. So is Europe, actually. So are you focused more on those regions initially? Or given that you also have connections, collegially to Stanford, for example, are you also trying to open up the whole global potential of Band?
Sure, for sure. I mean, if you think about this, I would like to separate them into two parts, right?
Okay.
One is the actual market to operate. Because you're a blockchain protocol, obviously this is global by nature, right? We deploy it on mainnet, anyone can use it, anyone in the world, and that's the beauty part, right? Yeah, I was gonna say that's the beauty part of this blockchain world, right? Anyone can use it. So I mean, even if you're in Thailand or we develop this in Thailand or Singapore, anyone in the world can use it, right? So we're not limited by that geography for sure, right? And that's why we have a lot of both team members and investors around the world, right? And then number two, when it comes to regulation, of course, we have to be more careful here. And we do talk to obviously the local authority first, because that's the first touch point. But once we do expand the tokens or that, obviously we will always have to talk to the local authorities when we go to that market, right?
Right, it makes a lot of sense. Do you think that in that context, because I'm hearing some allusions here from what you're not saying, do you think the US is stifling their own innovation, their own position in what is coming with regard to DLT and blockchain and in business, especially given they are taking so much time compared to Singapore, compared to even Australia, for example? We're following Europe's lead. We're not waiting.
Agree. I think to be fair though, I do admire a lot of the SEC work in recent years when they actually crack down some of the the illegal ICO, right? So I do admire that, where they say take it on a case by case basis and they don't do it a blanket ban like China. That's still admirable. I think that's still a good work. I do understand they need to protect people, investors, general retail, right? That's for sure. But as you mentioned, it does strive for innovation. It does slow down the progress for sure, and it does put a lot of burden to other startups, right? And if you look at, like, for example, Chef Eric always complained about this cost of compliance. If you look at Blockstack, they spend a fortune in order to get that offering, right? Why are you spending millions of dollars of this on just trying to be on compliant? It just doesn't make any sense when you don't even have any products. Right?
Yes, and so many platforms even. I was speaking with Sasha from Own Network. He was also saying that the expense for regulation in the US is really considerable compared to other regions. You're literally going through that now. So I would imagine over time they will have to redress that issue as well, because they'll have to be competitive internationally.
I think. For sure, and that's the beauty of democracy. I think people in the U.S. and the Congress will come to terms and just say we need to move forward. We need to make sure that we are the number one in the world, right? And we can move forward, right? And that's what we'll see in the next few years. But like you said, even now, even us being in Singapore or Thailand, the cost of being compliant, the legal cost is still fairly high for a traditional startup.
Okay. Now, with regard to your specific focus with oracles in mind, surely you have a bit of an advantage over others, even Chainlink, for example, because of the situation you're in geographically, because of the Singapore connection. Chainlink, as you know, is registered and has a lot of focus in other regions. Do you think that's really going to be a part of the game changer for you?
I wouldn't say that because we're in Thailand we are better, but I would say our focus, because we're in Thailand and we're in Asia and we understand the local market, we do have a strong go-to-market when it comes to local apps, right? So it's not just us versus Chainlink, but if you look at the protocol level, if you look at the app level, again, you see a lot more DApps coming out of Asia as well. You see a lot more blockchain protocol coming out of Asia as well, right? Okay. So it's not just us, but there's a lot of other projects. So that means, it's easier for us to actually talk to those projects. It's actually easier for us to sort of, go to market with them. Right?
So do you think that you have the chance to really expand, more rapidly?
For sure.
Comparatively?
That's right. And that's why, again, when I describe our go-to-market, we do sort of try to partner with Layer 1, because that's probably the most scalable way, right? If we try to go, the app one by one, that's really slow, right? We can't do the app one by one. What we do is we partner with Layer 1. They have a bunch of the apps already. So, hey, we have the data now, partner with all of them, right? So that's the way we think about how we should scale, I guess, our adoption and traction.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, with regard to some of the key aspects or points in which you can integrate and work with, some of the areas in terms of application are things like off-chain oracles, identity management, KYC, ranking, data sources for smart contracts. All those things are relevant. Do you want to just touch on that for a moment so we can better understand how you can work, so that in context with the real world of business, we can see more evidence that there's a link?
Sure. So as you know, there's a lot of vertical data that we can tackle. The way we think about this is we want to be a T-shape, where we say we have a lot of breadth, whereas we touched on a bunch of data, we touched on a lot of blockchain ecosystem, right? That's a breadth, right? Obviously, we only select one or two that we go really in depth. Right. That's why I teach it. That we really go in depth and try to make sure that this work, there are use cases, and that's why we mentioned a lot of decentralized finance, because clearly that is, I guess, number one right now when it comes to traction, right? Betting is another important one. If you look at China, if you look at all this coming out, there's a lot of them. So we also looking at that closely, right? So that's how we think about it. We want to touch on many of the important data, sport events, price, volumes, or even stock, right, or traditional commodities. Those are really big, right? And then identity is also another important one. Identity is something that we are actively exploring. Really important, because if you don't have that in a decentralized way, you can't have any on-chain governance. You cannot have any social media. You can't have those next generation of products, because why? Because you will have cyber attack. You cannot reward users, and there's really difficult.
And very little government support.
And that as well. And that's why you say, see that the EOS new social media, it requires a centralized KYC, right? Because like you said, because of governance, also because of on-chain, this reward system will not work without identities, right? So that's something we're also actively exploring. Ironically, with traditional companies, because again, trust has to end somewhere, right? You eventually have to trust someone in the system. Trust someone or trust some code, right? Trust has to end somewhere. And when it comes to identities, the way we look at it is, hey, you still need to be compliant with government. So you need to work with traditional company. You need to work with the government in order to make sure you can build at least as decentralized as possible.
Right, and essentially, because you're a protocol, you're really agnostic in that sense too. You're not saying that you'll only work with decentralized philosophies and ideologies, but you'll work with companies who are going to really try and build out the benefits of the mechanisms that are afforded by blockchain and beyond. So that makes a lot of sense. Right. Now, let's talk about the hard stuff as well, Sarvis, and that is, we've alluded to Chainlink, we've alluded to competitors, but there's also, a suite of ones that you know about, like OracleEyes, Witnet, Dirt, and there's a few others. But I really wanted to talk more about, okay, it's clear that there's some competitors here, but is there any possibility that some of these may become partners? Because having just one Oracle service is not going to cut it for many businesses. They want that insurance of another.
Agree. And you basically just answer your own questions.
Well, I want to get it from you though, because I'm not a techie and you are. So.
Right. So again, if you think about all this project, right, as I said before, data is the most important critical point, right? It's the most critical point of failure. If the data is wrong, your whole project or smart contract is wrong. So if you are a good project, if you're a sane project, you're not going to rely on one solution, right? That's impossible, right? It's like, hey, I'm going to fly an airplane with one engine. So if that engine fails, the whole airplane will fall, right? Not going to happen, right? What's going to happen is you're going to build a system of multiple solutions to either cross-check the data, or two, provide a fail-proof system where if one fails, hey, we resort to another one, right? Or most likely they use it in conjunction, basically, in order to cross-check the data, right? Because we use different mechanisms, we use different incentive, so so we can do cross-check the data itself, right? So that's the way we think about it. We're actually not competitors, but we are more complementary. If all of us succeed, then a lot of this project will use multiple solutions to cross-check the data.
Well, that's good to know. Now, have you had discussions with Chainlink, particularly?
Not openly, not right now. I guess I can't. Again, a lot of this thing cannot be disclosed at the moment.
You're stuttering a lot. That would suggest that you are talking behind the scenes a little bit, at least.
I am trying to recover my voice. So let me take a sip of water.
Okay, I understand. Now, with regard to some other more centralized entities, I did want to talk to you about those. And there's Microsoft, SAP, Salesforce. They're coming out with their own force as well, no pun intended, maybe. Right. But they also are aware of you, perhaps, and of Chainlink, and want to play in this arena.
Yep, for sure. Again, I think eventually what's going to come down to, sorry, when it comes to usages, right, it comes to trust, right? Who are you going to trust, right? Versus like if you're going to use a centralized company providing the data, or are you going to use a decentralized protocol or system in order to get that data, right? Now, obviously that comes to preference, that comes to the choices of the app developers, but we do believe that if you are legit the app developers, you're not going to trust all these centralized companies. What you're going to trust in, you're going to trust a decentralized protocol that utilize decentralized companies, right, in the solution in order to provide the data. And if you look at decentralized companies, frankly speaking, blockchain world and all this are really small, right?
Yes.
Frankly speaking, it is a tiny peanuts of the traditional business, right, at the moment, right? So it's not like, hey, they feel like, oh, strongly, we're not going to partner with you, we're not going to help you because, we are competitors or that. I don't think,
Makes a lot of sense.
at least I don't feel that coming out of them. I don't feel that when we have a lot of business discussion with both centralized and decentralized company. I don't, and that's the beauty of this, right? I think
we're really just at the cusp of this trend, this changeover into decentralized data governance, even just in the more generally in blockchain. It's just really at the beginnings, at that very first wave of development. So even in that context, do you think it's possible that some of these centralized entities may actually start to collaborate with you, start to really expand their own network so that they do perhaps employ decentralized technologies?
Oh, for sure. Again, cannot disclose all the information, but all the discussion with private companies, the traditional companies, have been really friendly, have been really open. Especially, it's funny because when you think of Thailand, you think of maybe Singapore is obviously people think of innovation, right? When you think of Thailand, people say, I don't know what's going on there, right? But actually, Thailand actually has quite an open board regulations. Really open regulation, meaning you have a fully licensed, exchanges. You have a fully, I guess, how do you call it, law to govern this, right? Just like Singapore. So it's actually really easy and clear for startup to navigate that, and that make it really easy for traditional companies to open up and say, hey, I want to partner with you. I want to work with you, right? And that's why you see a lot of even like the biggest bank in Thailand working with blockchain companies here in Thailand.
Well, it's good that you know that. And it's interesting that other traditional investors as well have really been paying attention to you. And I really need to highlight this. Sequoia, I'm a big fan of what they do, and they don't invest lightly. That's just the reality. You secured their support. What was the reason they gave you when you obviously had to pitch? What was something that really pushed them over the line to take you seriously and literally support you?
This is a tricky question because again, this is obviously from the investor perspective. I don't think I can speak on behalf of Sequoia, but I can speak on behalf of all the investors, right? Sure. When it comes to early stage investing, because we are early stage investing, people look at a couple of factors, right? Obviously, one is if the solution is big enough, meaning if the problem is big enough to be $1 billion of industry, right? If it is, obviously, then it's worth investing, right? The problem is big. Two, if the problem is big, does your solution make sense, right? Technologically, business-wise, right? Does that make any sense? Right? Obviously, you can solve the biggest problem, but your solution may not make any sense. Now, if the problem is big, if your solution makes sense, again, nobody said that solution will be the final solution. It rarely is the case, right? In almost every companies, decentralized or centralized, right? We're early stage. They know we're going to pivot. So if those two met, the last part is the team, right? If the team has a strong background to execute, right, then no matter what, since the problem is big, the solution makes sense, but it may not be the final solution, and the team is really strong technologically, business-wise, then obviously then they trust that, hey, no matter what, the team will pivot, the team will figure out the right solution.
It's just like an IPO. So sorry to interrupt, but it's just like an IPO with regard to the assessment that traditional investors would make, or traditional venture capital. But in crypto, it hasn't always been that way, Sauravis. That's why I did mention the single out Sequoia, because they have a track record that is different to some of the crypto VCs that have been more questionable, been more about pumping, dumping, really supporting that quick fix for them and that quick capital. So that's why I asked, because I want to see companies really invest in you longitudinally, because they see this vision that you just, and the reasons you just articulated, so that we can trust also Band to be something that's also supporting reciprocally that kind of ethos.
For sure, and like you said, this is precisely why in our seed round we sort of choose more traditional investors, even though it's a token sales. That we choose more traditional investors mainly because the long-term visions, right? The long-term vision that we say, hey, this is not going to be a 1 or 2 years mission, right? It's is a long-term mission. It would take a lot of time to crack, but if we do, it's a big industry, right? And that's why these companies are, one, really hand-on, really helpful, and stay with us long-term. And that's really important.
Well, congratulations for securing the ones you so far. You've got Dunamu Partners, Sequoia, SEAX, so there's more to come, I would imagine. Now, let's talk about your raise. You already alluded to a seed round. Where are we at in this phase of development so that we can get an understanding of, are you going to open up to more seed investors? And, you know, all the amounts as well. How much are you going to open up for these different categories as you move towards the end goal of listing?
Okay, I'm going to be a bit more cloudy here since obviously some of these are quite sensitive. I'll try my best. So basically, again, if you look at our principle, we want to be decentralized eventually. So we need to have enough capital to support us in the next at least 4 to 5 years in order to, you know, bring this adoption to it, to make sure, you know, even though we deploy it on mainnet, we want to make sure, you know, we continue to optimize, we continue to, you know, support this, right, in the foundation.
So you need money in the way in which you raise.
That's right. So we do need capital, and that's why, you know, to be fair, when you see a lot of this project raising a big money, it is necessary if you want to last for 5 to 6 years, right? It's not like you're gonna do additional raise when you it's not like a traditional company.
Well, it depends on how much they're raising, though, Sorvis, respectfully. Some of them raise ridiculous amounts, so hopefully that's not you.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah, obviously it's not the 2017 where we raised hundreds of millions of dollars, right? We raised in the 7 digits, right? But anyway, so we do raise 3 million already. We are raising a couple more, mostly from private investors. Again, due to both regulation and two, due to more again strategic angle where we want to onboard partners who help us long term, who do have that, you know, capabilities to help us go to market around the world. Right?
That's what we want to hear. So you're not raising a great deal. You're talking 3 million and a few more million. Okay, so have you got an idea for the listeners about hard caps, for example? You know, have you really built this metric out, and are you disclosing any of this yet?
So I don't think I'm allowed to disclose it publicly yet. We are working with regulators and you know, obviously, you know, with exchanges, with, you know, private investors and all that. But I can tell you, we're not raising a big amount. Like, obviously, we're not going to be like crazy raising 20 millions. That's not going to be the case for sure.
That's good to know.
That's going to be the case for sure. Whatever we raise, we justified it. And number two, again, we are looking at partners who can help us, right? So that when we talk about partners, we talk about both geography. So like, you know, we have investors from Sequoia Global, we have, you know, Dunamu from Korea, we have CX from Southeast Asia, we have a couple investors coming in from Hong Kong, Singapore, China, US. So now we have a you know, global base of investors, right, to help us around the world.
That's great to hear. Now, what about lockups? Because when we talk about traditional, often, you know, it's very commonplace for them to accept a long lockup because that's just the way that business works with IPOs. Sure. So are they confident and that they can, are they so confident that they're willing to lock up for long term?
Sure. So when it comes to lockup, we do have a longer lockup than many companies, I would say, many of the decentralized companies. Now, obviously, it's not going to be like traditional world where it's locked up for 4 or 5 years, obviously for them, right? Because crypto is
too long in crypto.
Crypto is a fast-moving tech, obviously industry, and also people need to understand the nature of this, right? Where it was changing, right? So again, nobody want to take that much of a risk, I would say, right? But we do have a longer lockup than most. But what we like to do is, again, with all these partners, we don't just take their money. We do sit down with them. We do say, hey, what is our, I guess, strategy for the next 2 to 3 years? Brought them into the visions, got them to help us execute it. And that's the way we make them stay with us, right? Even with lockup, even without lockup, we would be comfortable saying that most of our token holders will hold, right? Because they bought into the vision that say, hey, you know, 2 3 years from now we can be, you know, win a lot more than this, right? And that's the only reason why they hold. As an investor, everyone want to make money. Let's be real, right? Everyone want to make money. So the only reason how you can hold them accountable or basically become a long-term partner is to say, hey, this is our long-term visions. This is what we want to do. And if we execute it well, this is where we're going to be.
Got it. Now,
Chainlink, right? It take them 2 years to become a $3-4 billion market cap now.
Right. And that's the interesting thing. I'm glad you raised that because 2 parts of this now follow up, and that's your marketing strategy and to make sure that you really secure a successful one. Chainlink have a really successful marketing strategy, but also there's some question marks about some potentially external groups that have really grabbed a hold of the scarcity or the narrative of Chainlink beyond their control potentially. But there's certainly suggestions out there that there's problems inherent with the way in which crypto can organically start to manipulate and foster price changes and manipulation that's just really beyond the control of startups. Now, with going back to you, can we guarantee from you that you haven't got like separate special bonuses for different tiers? Can you really give us confidence that you're fair in the way that you have set out this seed round and anything that's subsequent to that?
Sure. Again, we are being transparent as much as we can when it comes to regulation, when it comes to disclosing everything to the public, right? If right now we don't engage much with the public when it comes to token sales, obviously, but if and once we do, we will disclose everything publicly. And I can tell you now, there is no sketchy bonus, there's no sketchy discounted. Everyone who participated in the private round received the same term.
That's good to know. That puts a lot of trust, I think, for those people. Now, for the future, let's talk about the possibility of IEO, for example. Is it possible that you may do an IEO?
Again, I don't think I can comment on that, but what I can say is obviously to the best interest of the project, we do want to get our token to the hands of the people who can use our projects, who can use our blockchain protocol. That's the most important for us, right? So we do want to have a mechanisms, whether that be, you can call it IEO, you can call it exchange listing, you can call it airdrops, whatever it means. We to get our tokens to the hands of the developers.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, Sauravis, putting two and two together, Sequoia, a lot of other substantial investors with great reputations, they have jumped into the bandwagon of Band. That to me suggests that similar high-standing top-tier exchanges are paying attention to you, all the way to Coinbase, I would suspect. So are you talking at all to anyone with regard to conversations at least? Are they knocking on your door to say, hey, can we learn more about Band Protocol? We're interested.
I can't really comment on that. I think it's quite sensitive detail.
Sure.
But we'll know soon enough. Yes.
Got it. Okay. Now, other partnerships you've made, Certic is another doing auditing, doing assessments for you. Can we expect any more partnerships to unfurl in the near future? So that for
sure. I think we have been quite focused in terms of engineering, making sure our product is right. That's why we do the first product announcement with Certix to make sure everything is secure, everything is right. Now that we are closer to launch date, meaning we're going to launch our mainnet soon in the next couple of months, expect a lot more announcement from us when they come to partnership, when they come to tractions, when they come to all these different things that you've been asking for. And then we'll definitely update everything in the communities. So again, we want to be decentralized. So if you look at our blog posts in the Mediums or in Telegram group, we do a lot of updates when it comes to our progress, our partnership, as well as the technical updates. So we do a lot of the articles like to teach people on solidities, on optimizing on this as well. So we do contribute back. But yeah, stay tuned for that. I think we'll have a lot more updates in the coming months for sure.
Absolutely. Well, honestly, on behalf of all those who wanted to know more about Band Protocol, I really do appreciate your time, Sauravis. You've been more than transparent. You've really just been relaxed and let us know exactly what your development is, what your intentions are. Clearly, there's a strong vision for you in the future with regard to mainnet and beyond. What's some of the big things that excite you in the near future? Mainnet clearly is one. What about around that for the rest of the year?
Right. I mean, for us, ultimately, what we focus on is traction, right? Traction, right? Adoption. That's what we focus on. And what excites me is that in the next couple of months and years, once we launch this with our partners and all that, I think we are quite excited to see a lot more adoption when it comes to blockchain technology, when it comes to our own smart contract and protocol, right? And that's the key metric. That's the only metric that we track, right? In companies. How do we optimize for more QE transactions? How can we optimize for more usages? And that's precisely why we select our partners to make sure that we optimize for that. Right?
Got it. So use case driven, real world driven.
For sure. And I think a lot of the DeFi projects that we have seen so far, unfortunately, come from the US. Most of them actually come from the US. If you look at this, all of them live in the Bay Area, right?
Right.
But I think what excites me is in the next couple of months and years, we're going to see more of that unveiled in Asia. That's what we're quite excited about.
Absolutely. So clearly, what's
even more adoption, right, and faster adoption, and more money being at stake for sure.
Right. And what I like about here, from what you've said, is that it's all about trying to make sure that people can see evidence, empirical evidence, that there's more than just this narrative of speculation built into what we see now. You know, because right now there's still very limited proof of use case. Your core asset is making sure that there's a translation between the protocol and beyond. Looking forward to seeing more of that evidence as you build out. But right now, it's all the way to mainnet for you in the next few months. And then hopefully we can catch up again to start to explore what you're doing post mainnet, because it's all going to be all rest on that proof. Good luck with your collaborations. Good luck with further partnerships. Good luck with further funding. And yeah, I'll give you a buzz post mainnet so we can really find out what Ben can do for the rest of the year.
For sure. Thank you very much. And if you feel free to check out all our other products. Even though we're early in testnet, we do have a lot of this data set on and built out already, and we launched it already. So you can definitely check it out.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Soros, for your time. I really do appreciate it.
No, thank you as well. Thank you for having me here.
You're welcome.
I'll talk to you soon.